to say, after putting together my own Wuthering Heights look at the last minute, I have even more respect for Oscar-winning costume designer Jacqueline Duran. Because the look of this movie is pretty freaking hard to duplicate, particularly in like 2 days with like $50 on Amazon. But I think it was fun. I think it's great that this movie inspires, like other recent films, particularly ones aimed at women, to dress up. And I did this also for Nosferatu, which actually kind of is in a similar space as well. But I'm going to reference Alan Moore, and that movie felt very Alan Moore-like to me. And in some ways, this one does as well. If you're a comic book reader looking for an entry point into Wuthering Heights, think of it like an Alan Moore novel. And just as naughty. If you read Alan Moore, you know what I'm talking about. All right, so I did not have great expectations for Wuthering Heights. And I say great expectations because, to my surprise, Emerald Fennell's Opus is actually a real movie. It did not seem like one from the ad campaign. But while I was watching it, it actually called to mind two of my favorite David Lean films. I mean, that's amazing that this Wuthering Heights movie could feel like David Lean. But not only great expectations, but Dr. Zhivago. By the way, both adaptations of novels as well, with a twist of Moulin Rouge, although this is not a musical. But it does have modern music from Charlie XCX. So that's a similarity as well as the design. And as I said, it feels like the work of comic book writer Alan Moore and also infamous at his time novelist D.H. Lawrence. Does it feel at all like Emily Bronte, who wrote the darn thing? Well, I have to be honest with you. I've never read Wuthering Heights. I've seen the original, the 1939 film, the most famous adaptation up until now. We'll see how this one's received. So far, so good with the press. But I haven't read the actual book, so I'm not familiar with Emily Bronte's tone. But one of you who is a big fan, when I tweeted that I'd seen the movie, wrote back, you were very concerned about it, and I was feeling bad for you because this is really a very loose adaptation. But then at the end, this person said, just tell me it captures Kathy and Heathcliff's toxic love. And I was like, oh boy, does it? It definitely captures toxic love. Like for a moment, you're like, what's wrong with you two? And everybody in the movie feels that way as well. Like for most of the film, I'd say like the first 2/3, I was swept away by the sexy romance. Titillating is definitely an apt description of this movie. But it in a classy way. As I said, Alan Moore and D.H. Lawrence, who were both extremely inappropriate. All right, so anyway, and then in the third act, though, it actually moved me to tears. But in honor of this movie, I didn't ugly cry. My eyes welled up with tears, and then one or two cascaded down my cheek as I watched the film. I was like, it's so sad. It really was sad. I think that Fennell draws inspiration from a number of iconic doomed romances, including Gone with the Wind, where there's correlations not only in the costume design, but in the movie poster itself, the first poster, a direct correlation. And then also Romeo and Juliet, which is very cleverly referenced in the film. Look for that, and then you'll note how Emerald Fennell weaves that into her adaptation of Wuthering Heights. So on that note, because again, I know a lot of you are very interested, is this movie at all faithful to the source material? So again, as I said, I've never read the original novel, but I had seen the 1939 film. And as I watched this new movie, I was like, oh, these are two very different movies. Perhaps this one is more accurate to the source material. So after I saw the new Wuthering Heights, I went and looked up the original, and I think if you're a real stickler for the original, this movie you're just going to have to let that go, or this movie's going to be absolutely infuriating to you, because not only are significant liberties taken, but a lot of stuff is just downright changed, just totally changed. And again, as someone who didn't read the original book, that doesn't bother me. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan at all of the source material. So I'm open to experimenting with it. I think The way I'm looking at the film, and the way I would encourage you to look at it as well, is that it's more of Emerald Fennell's ode to doomed romances in general. And maybe she feels that Wuthering Heights is the ultimate doomed romance. So that's why she chose it as not only the title, but the framework for her movie, although she's just drawing and pulling from so many other things. I mean, there's a huge plot point in the film, which is not in the book at all. But I liked it because it draws from another doomed romance. All right, now another issue that people have taken up, and I totally understand, is the casting of Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff, because there is a very valid case based on Emily Bronte's writing that it's supposed to be a character of color. And that's a point of contention with some people. I've seen the excerpts. It seems to me that Heathcliff is at least supposed to be of mixed race. So I can understand the frustration of casting Jacob Elordi. And you're going to have to decide for yourself if that's a deal breaker. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the source material, so I'm open to this interpretation. But this is a big hurdle to overcome because it's taking a role away from somebody, an actor of color. For me, Elordi is so good in the role, and the movie is otherwise very diverse. I mean, Chau and Shazad Latif have very large roles in the film, and it feels very modern overall. It's hard. Jacob Elordi is so good. This is going to be hard for the movie to overcome, and I'll be curious to see how people react once they've seen it. Would Omar Sharif have been a better Heathcliff? Without a doubt, that would have solved all this movie's problems. But there isn't an actor today like Sharif. And again, Emerald Fennell isn't making a straight adaptation of Wuthering Heights, and the film is still diverse. So, you're going to have to decide how you feel about that. All right, now, speaking of Fennell, she and Robbie, I think, are, particularly, by the way, Margot Robbie, are part of, and in fact, leading an exciting female revolution in Hollywood. It has always seemed that women have been drawn to books and men have been drawn to movies. But then I'd say maybe 25 years ago, women started getting really amazing roles on the small screen. Even older actresses like Nicole Kidman, and I think Kyra Sedgwick was one of the earliest people, or actresses, have said the roles are better for older women on the small screen. And so that became a really great place for women as well. But Hollywood just couldn't get women to the multiplex. Sometimes movies aimed at women would do quite well, but it was only here and there. And even then, the movies themselves seemed smaller, right? Like women just weren't interested in blockbusters, it seemed. But that's what's so exciting about what's happening now. So it turns out that women do love blockbusters, but they have to be blockbusters tailored to them. And they look so different than the blockbusters that men like. So here are some great examples. And Wicked also, by the way, I realized that when I was writing my notes later on. But we'll bring up Wicked a little bit later. But I do want to name check Wicked because I know a lot of you will be like, oh, Wicked? But this is very interesting here. So you have Wonder Woman. That was an early sign, right? And then, of course, Barbie, right? And then this year, we have two. We have Wuthering Heights and then also The Bride, both from Warner Brothers. In fact, all four of these movies are from Warner Brothers. How amazing is that? And they're all female directors. That's why Wicked doesn't quite fit in what I'm pointing out here. But, Wicked is adjacent. But isn't that amazing? And so 2026 with Wuthering Heights and The Bride, it could really maybe start to get some momentum going here, which is, I think, very exciting, coming after the two Wicked movies and Barbie. I think that's great. It's a shame that Wonder Woman fell away. But so after seeing Wuthering Heights, I tweeted that while it's a very different movie from Barbie, I felt that it was as good as Barbie. And some of you are like, why do you have to bring Barbie up, Grace? Well, it's because I don't only mean the quality of the film. And as you can see, there's a lot of correlation behind the scenes and a lot of the same people involved, but also the experience, right? So Wuthering Heights washed over me the way Barbie washed over me. Not just that I was entertained, and not only was I blown away by the heightened stylization of both films, and not only did I emotionally connect to the story that I was watching, but as a woman, I feel that these movies get me in a way that a lot of popular entertainment does not. get women in general. And that's really cool. That's such an incredible feeling. It is, I hear, what it's like when you read a really good book, right? I mean, I just think that's phenomenal. As I've explained before, I used to be a very big reader, but I get so into books that it makes me very antisocial and I don't talk to anybody for weeks. And so that's why I only read short form content now, because it's just so bad for my social life. But yes, and movies like this get me back into the novel space because they feel like novels. It's just really fantastic. But this is really, I think when you see, the ad campaign does not capture what it's like to watch this movie. So, and by the way, Margot Robbie is a huge driving force, as I said, to this new movement, both on and off camera. My, oh my, how far Margot Robbie has come. Remember we used to say that she couldn't produce movies where she was involved, right? I mean, she was making a lot of flops and really bad career decisions, but she's on a roll right now. She seems to really know what she's doing, right? Her production company, Lucky Chap, specializes in female-centric films. So how did she get things so wrong with Birds of Prey, right? Part of me feels that maybe because it was a comic book property, and that's primarily been for male audiences, right? I mean, there are women who enjoy comic books, myself included, but we're a very small percentage of the fandom. Maybe there was I still also believe it was a fateful error that couldn't be course corrected, that she tried to turn Birds of Prey into Gotham City Sirens. Considering how good Barbie and Wuthering Heights are, it's such a shame she never made Gotham City Sirens, because I think she would have done an amazing job with that. She chose poorly to reference. I always love to reference that whenever I can. But anyway, but it does make me concerned, like maybe she should, she's considering doing a Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Apparently that's still a priority for her in Disney. And I worry if that will turn out as well, because there's a very deep feminism to her projects. And I don't think anybody wants that in a Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And how many super successful ultra feminist movies can Margot Robbie make? We're going to find out. But I think so far she's going to have 2 of them. And that's pretty amazing. What do you think? Do you think that Pirates of the Caribbean, it just doesn't seem to fit to me. But anyway, like Barbie, Wuthering Heights is, as I said, highly stylized, feels like playing with dolls, you'll see, and has a fantastic role for a male lead. I think that's amazing and commendable, that these female-centric films are also love letters to guys. That's crucial. And I think, really, I mean, it's unfortunate that some men are dismissive of these movies when these movies take men so seriously, right? Ken was an incredible role, and I think so is Heathcliff. And I think also it's important, though, to point out that in both cases, you have actors who are cast in these roles who love, respect, appreciate, and get women, right? I mean, Jacob Elordi's going around. I just saw a story. He was like, talking to women on the red carpet and being like, oh, I saw those Snoopy memes of me with Snoopy. And I'm like, wow, this guy's either crazy like a fox or he's, I hope he's that genuine. And that's where he's really coming from. But I think that's why Ryan Gosling and Jacob Elordi operate so effectively in these female spaces. And just as Barbie was on Ken's side, he doesn't get enough respect. The pressures on men are intense. Wuthering Heights is very much on Heathcliff's side, highlighting how women can be cruel to men, often for fun, and can use men, right? And aren't clear enough of what they want from men. And also, in the case where they're both destitute, women have the option of finding financial security through rich men. And that causes them to abandon their fellow men who, to pass up romance for financial security, which, leaves these other guys abandoned. And when I was watching, I was like, I hope that certain guys give Wuthering Heights a chance, because it's acknowledging some of your complaints. So I thought that was really interesting. All right. Okay. So we've been talking about all this other stuff. Is this movie sexy or what? Where's the romance? Is there any romance? Yeah, the movie is definitely very sexy. The sexual tension in this film is off the charts. Like when Kathy and Heathcliff get older and Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie start playing them, they are being so mean to each other that I had to think for a moment, why are they being so mean? And it kind of occurred to me that it's just they're frustrated that they don't know how to turn their friendship, I think they've both friend-zoned each other, and that you can just feel their frustration and how, like, it's just palpable. And I was very much enjoying the story. And I was, again, as I said, I was pleasantly surprised that there was even a story. But then at a certain point in the movie, even I became frustrated, and I was like, are you guys going to ever do it or what? And it was fascinating to me that at the very moment that I had that thought, Jacob Elordi's character is walking away. And as soon as I thought that, he turned around and came back, and they finally started to get it on. And I thought to myself, does Emerald Fennell have that much control over how the audience is feeling, that she knew what our breaking point would be? And she knew that she got us just to the point where we felt like Kathy and Heathcliff. And then she was like, bam. And yes, after that, there was this really long, sexy montage that made up for lost time. But that was very interesting to me. The idea that Emerald Fennell might have that much control over the film. That's amazing. So yes, but it's very sexy, like very scandalous. But I still felt that it remained highbrow. That's why I referenced D.H. Lawrence, right? And he was considered scandalous in the early 1900s. So much so that, in fact, his book had to be Lady Chatterley's Lover. I read that in school, but you couldn't read it when it first came out. Nobody could, because it had to be published privately. And also it was pirated back in the day. Ye old high seas. People had to pirate it. And then also you could buy a censored version. But in 1960, it was published in 1928. So many years later, in 1960, Penguin Books tried to publish the uncensored version. And I thought this was very interesting, so I'm including it in the review. And I'm also trying to emphasize how inappropriate Lady Chatterley's Lover is, to let you know that this movie is that level of inappropriateness. So the UK government actually sued Penguin Books for indecency. But the jury was like, let them read smut. And it became available for the general public to read. And that actually became a selling point, as you can see from this fun old photo. Now you can watch movies like Wuthering Heights for Valentine's Day weekend. And again, as I said, it's very Alan Moore-esque. And if you're at all familiar with Alan Moore's material, that his comic books can be quite sexy. That's a very nice way to put it as well. Now, recently, with shows like, Outlander, there have been discussions about filming romantic scenes for the male versus female gaze. Gaze with a G, G-A-Z-E. I don't know which gaze this film is filmed from. I thought the scenes were very enjoyable, let's say, right? But I would think anyone would find this movie sexy because both leads are so attractive and so charismatic. I was like, when I was watching it, I was like, I think there's something here for everybody, right? There's a real smorgasbord of sexiness. So, and also, unlike some of their more modern counterparts, I'm looking at you, Keira Knightley, neither Elordi nor Robbie, there's a lot of scenes in them in the rain, which reminded me a little bit of her Pride and Prejudice. But Keira Knightley had an issue where she would vogue all the time, and neither Elordi or Robbie vogue. Like, they don't even seem to think of themselves as particularly attractive. And I think that makes them very likable in their roles and allows the audience, it feels more real. It feels like they're actors. I really liked that. Now, everybody already knows that Margot Robbie is stunning. She looked very Grace Kelly-like here to me. And she's older than Elordi. And some people have commented on that as well. But I think the script, it's not overt about it, but there is a line or two where you're like, oh, I understand. She's supposed to be older, right? And Margot Robbie has done an interview with Emerald Fennell talking about the fact that, they wanted Kathy to seem older to modern audiences. Whereas, of course, in the book, older was considered like 21 at that time, right? Or maybe even younger, to be well past old maid age, as is said here. So that's why they decided to go with Margot Robbie. And I felt it worked. But we know Margot Robbie's great. We know she's stunning. So I think the real surprise, the real standout here in that regard, she holds her own. I don't want to take anything away from her performance. But Jacob Elordi, I think, is going to be a breakout star. Frankenstein was like the appetizer. I don't even know. Bond might end up being the full meal. But I think he's building his career amazingly. Now, to be honest, Jacob Elordi's not my type. But he's so tall and muscular, and he has this soft but yet very deep voice, and he's doing and saying such sexy things here. I think that almost anyone would at least be a little bit swept away by his intense masculine energy, let's say. I would say two of my favorite moments of his in the movie are one, where he picks up Margot Robbie by just the strings on her corset and lifts her up to him. I was like, that's a pretty good move. And then two, darn it, corsets are out of style, guys. You'll have to think of something else. But then also, well, there's this one shot, you'll know it when you see it, when he's silhouetted, shirtless, in a window frame with the moonlight coming in behind him. I was like, that's an incredible shot. That was beautiful. I wasn't sure about him being cast as Bond. There had been news that he had met with Denis Villeneuve. I know some of you are like, he's not British, but I think he's Australian, right? And that's British adjacent, so maybe they feel it'll work. Very complicated history, of course, between Australia and England. But after this movie, in terms of being Bond, you know, with his Oscar nomination for Frankenstein and how romantic he is here, but still also very forceful, they said they wanted a Bond who seemed like could kill you with his bare hands. I think he looks like he could do that, especially when you see him here. So I think he'd make for an amazing Bond. And I tweeted that. And somebody pointed out, one of you pointed out, that Timothy Dalton had just played Heathcliff before he was cast as Bond, which I thought was not only an amazing coincidence, but also a little scary because Timothy Dalton ended up being the least successful Bond. Well, maybe not the least successful. I think maybe Lazenby was, or David Niven, but like pretty low down there. I would not want to repeat that. So is Wuthering Heights a feminist film? Well, I think it is in that it treats women as complex, very real people, right? And also something else that I thought that it explored, which was interesting, is that you have Kathy, who's technically a lady, even though she's quite poor. She's technically a lady, so she's not allowed to do any work around the house. And she lives in the middle of nowhere. So there's nothing for her to do all day or anyone for her to really see. She's like a prisoner or like a doll, waiting to be played with, right? Which I think is part of why she's like always still acts like a child and doesn't know any better in a lot of cases and is just oh so very bored. You know, when I was watching the movie, I was like, you know, back in the day, well, you know, actually not that long ago when you think of, you know, the length of human history, but women didn't have very much to do. I mean, if you took away their responsibilities of cooking, you know, back in the day of cooking and cleaning and child raising, you know, what is there for Kathy to do? She just sits there. And I think that creates, and so does some of the other people in the movie. And that boredom, that desperation, I think is a real pressure cooker. And then when you add sexual frustration on top of all of it, I mean, it's nuts. And then also there's poor Heathcliff, who is also as destitute as Kathy, but doesn't even have a good family to reference. And so he's having a very hard time. Like he's just, and they also have another character that kind of references that a little bit as well, which I thought was interesting. All right, Kathy and Heathcliff, Elordi, you know, Robbie and Elordi. Is there anyone else in this movie? There is. Let's talk about them. There are a number of really fantastic performances in this film. And while I understand that the red carpet and the publicity campaign has had to focus on Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi, right? They're the big star, celebrity, sexy couple. I do feel a little bad that they're shining a spotlight on some of the other cast members who contribute so much to the film. Maybe once people see the movie, these other actors will start to get their flowers as well, because the movie wouldn't be as good without their wonderful supporting work. Owen Cooper, I thought he might be a one-hit wonder, perhaps, off of Adolescence. I thought he was good in that, but I don't know. I wasn't sure. This, for me, is proof that he actually is a great actor. He plays a young Heathcliff. And I did think of the fact that he had acted, you know, he'd said in his acceptance speech at the Golden Globes, and I thought it was a great speech, that, you know, always push yourself outside of your comfort zone, because when he signed up for acting classes, he was the only boy in the class, and that had felt weird for him, but he decided to pursue it anyway. And I thought it was interesting that he doesn't, that like feeling of awkwardness has gone away. Like he's so in touch with his feelings. He's such a serious actor, you know, like Jacob Elordi, I think he operates very well in a feminine space. He did a great job here. I really bought him as a young Jacob Elordi, which is, you know, for the actress who played young Kathy, she was good. She was actually quite good, especially as the movie went on, but she looked so little like Margot Robbie that broke that illusion for me. I was like, she looked a little bit more like a Brittany Snow, or I think Annalee Ashford is the other actress. She reminded me quite a bit of those actresses. So, she had that same spunk too. I liked her. She was very good, but she didn't feel at all like Margot Robbie. But then also Chau. Well, I don't want to give anything away about her role. This one is to change significantly, but it's very good. I really loved what was done here, and Chau did an amazing job. Shazad Latif and Martin Clunes really add to that amazing feeling of this being like an instant classic. And then Alison Oliver comes so close, and I think some will say succeeds in stealing the movie. Talk about also another breakout role. She's incredible here. She was apparently in Emerald Fennell's Saltburn, which I have not seen, as was Elordi. And I'd be curious, for those of you, was she as good in that movie as she is here? She's really talented. And House of the Dragon fans, Ewan Mitchell, aka Aemond Targaryen, has a small role here. I was like, is that you, Aemond? But then, he goes on to have one of the kinkiest scenes in the movie. So I know a lot of you really like Aemond, so you'll be quite pleased with his work here. Now, while this movie feels like, as I said, some great classic novels and films brought to life, it also feels at the same time, very modern. And it has beautiful costumes and sets. Just stunning. Like stunning. This will be an Oscar contender, at least in this regard, at the very least. I mean, it feels like you're in a high-end fashion magazine or a modern art museum. It's just incredible. And these sets and costumes call to mind the level of attention to detail of Barbie and Wicked. And as I said, I think Wicked kind of fits with this as well. And one of the ways that Wicked particularly fits is that Wicked felt very much like a classic movie musical. And this feels like a classic adaptation of a novel as well. And also, like Barbie, has a modern soundtrack. The songs by Charlie XCX, I think, blend perfectly. They didn't really stand out to me, a little bit like the way the Barbie songs do. But they just kind of like, they blended into the film so well that I think that's great. They didn't break the experience, but I like them quite a bit. Emerald Fennell is responsible for pulling all of these things together. That's all her credit. And like Greta Gerwig, she comes across as in complete control. And considering all the classic film references in Barbie, right, and in Wuthering Heights, clearly both of these women directors are lovers, students, and masters of film, right? And I think that's why these films feel both very exciting, like they're pushing the boundaries of film, but at the same time, they feel like instant classics because they have that classic feel to them. It's a very impressive thing to pull off. And Margot Robbie, to her credit, not only stars in both these films, but produced both of them. And I'm excited to see what she does next, but I'm a little nervous that her upcoming projects are Ocean's 11 and Pirates of the Caribbean, which are more male-centric. And I don't know if, I worry they might be another Birds of Prey situation, because I don't know if what's becoming her signature style will work as well there. She's also doing The Sims, which I think might be a better fit for her. What do you think? I mean, I'm curious. And we'll see how Wuthering, I think it's going to have an amazing Valentine's Day weekend, but we'll see how people react to it and how it does on the long run. But I just think it's an incredible movie. I loved it. I mean, we saw what happened to Barbie. People eventually turned on that. We'll see what happens with Wuthering Heights. So that's my non-spoiler review of Wuthering Heights, the Valentine's Day movie. Probably, in my opinion, the greatest Valentine's Day movie of all time. And there's no competition. There's only that Valentine's Day movie from a few years ago. But this is incredible. And it really lucked out that Valentine's Day falls on a Saturday and Galentine's Day is on Friday. It's going to do big business. All right, so again, that's my review. Share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.